Hey, good Saturday, everybody. Great to see you. And we've got a lot to talk about in today's video with multiple chances for winter storms across the country as we continue on down through February. And I'll tell you, I think the models are beginning to come together. This could be a pretty active month, maybe a little bit closer to what the first half of January looked like. However, the caveat is I think new areas will get in on that winter weather potential, and we could see some pretty high impacts out of it as well. Now, the other kind of thing here is it's not going to be everybody. It's going to be kind of a nation divided as we talk about this. Part of the country getting very cold, wintry, icy conditions, and other parts of the country getting in on full-blown spring fever as we continue tracking on through February. But that kind of dividing line is going to shift and move around, and that's what I'm going to tell you about in today's video and tell you who could get the worst of it as we continue on through the new calendar month. Alrighty, folks. If you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, hit the bell for the latest notifications. Also comment, let me know where you're watching from, and let me know your predictions for Groundhog Day tomorrow. Always kind of a fun meteorological, that's also not really a meteorological holiday, but still a fun one either way. So definitely let me know what you think Punxsutawney Phil will find whenever they bring him out to look at his shadow tomorrow morning there in Punxsutawney. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and dive on into the data and start talking weather because, again, a pretty active pattern ahead. Now, looking at current satellite imagery, we've got a couple kind of interesting features on the map. Now, I'm going to kind of point out something that you might not think would be the first thing I point out, but look up north into Canada. You see this big area of blue? This actually is not cloud cover. These are just very cold Arctic temperatures. We still have kind of Arctic outbreaks happening in the northern hemisphere. They're just not getting quite as far south as we saw back in January when we had that historic Gulf Coast snowstorm. So we still got very cold air. I just want to point that out here, and this is going to move southward slightly over the next couple of days, and then eventually in the longer range, I think moving even further south. That's what we really need to find out. I think we're confident on the active storm track. The question will be, where does that track set up in relation to the cold air that we have on the map? Now, currently, this is the remnants of yesterday's storm kicking on out of here. You can see there moving off the eastern seaboard, and then the big story right now is just what an absolute mess it is out west. The atmospheric river has returned, that more La Nina negative PNA-like pattern kind of showing back up here, and with it, a ton of Rocky Mountain snow and pieces of energy that are kind of getting shot out of the Rockies towards the east is what we're experiencing here in the more near term and even really into the medium term and arguably into the long term as well. And you'll see what I mean by that in just a moment. But starting off with radar, we'll go to the northeast, a little bit of snow left over on the backside of our storm system from yesterday through Boston, Portland, into the down east areas of Maine, and then even a little bit of lake effect here coming off the Finger Lakes throughout this morning, and that will likely continue, but slowly wane throughout the afternoon. Now, we go east, or west rather, and that's where things get a little bit more active. Let's zoom in on this part of the country. We've got snow in portions of Minnesota, back through the Dakotas, and then a more kind of widespread mess out west. You're thinking, all right, well, not a lot happening right now, but if I zoom out a little bit, yeah, look at this atmospheric train of moisture coming into the western half of the country, and that'll really be the theme, I think, through the next week or so. This big kind of pineapple express, if you will, maybe not quite that much of a pineapple express. Hawaii's still way back here, so we're not quite connected all the way to Hawaii, but you get the point here. A big atmospheric river continuing to bring the impacts out here, and because of that, we've got plenty of current alerts on the map out there. Again, in the east, relatively quiet right now. Don't get too excited, though. It won't last forever. Out west, though, that's where the very active weather is at this moment, and you can see that here. These pink boxes, winter storm warnings, winter storm watches in that blue. We've got flood watches in the green, high wind warnings in the more Dijon and kind of the more beigeish colors on the map there. So it's definitely active out there. And the kind of bad news for the east, or good news if you like active weather, is all this energy is not going to stay bottled up out there forever. Basically, we've got a big area of low pressure that's just kind of, again, creating this atmospheric river, and little pieces of it are going to break off and kind of turn into short waves and cross the upper part of the country. And because of that, we're going to get some winter weather really not far from now into portions of the east. And you can see that here. Same thing I just showed you, but in a more meteorological kind of map here. This is our upper level vorticity, or just kind of the storm energy. And right now, like I mentioned, we've got that big area of low pressure, this kind of upper level low parked over British Columbia, and that's just really amplifying the jet here towards the west coast, really bringing all of that moisture. But what's going to happen throughout time, and you kind of see it a little bit here, is little lobes of it kind of along the edge are going to break off again and kind of move towards the northeastern United States, towards New England, and bring these little clipper-like systems over the next couple of days. So you can see that. I'll move it ahead. Here's into this weekend, Sunday evening. Here's one little clipper. Here's another clipper. You kind of see how those pieces of energy break off from the main flow. And then I think that'll be the main storyline outside of just the ongoing active weather out west. Again, no matter what, the big piece of energy is still going to stay there and bring a ton of energy and precipitation into the western part of the country, but those little lobes of energy that break off to the east will bring impactful weather on their own. Now let's kind of talk about the west a little more in depth, and then we'll talk about the east. I know all my viewers, or most of you, are from the east. Don't worry, we're going to get there. By the way, timestamps below, so you can kind of skip ahead if you feel so inclined to do that. But looking out west, this is this afternoon, and I'm going to kind of breeze through it a little bit because it doesn't really change. It's just wave after wave after wave of Rocky Mountain snow up into the Cascades. I mean, maybe areas like Seattle or not far from Seattle could try to get in on some of that wintry weather. It's always tough to get the rain snow line that far down the mountain, but we'll see if Seattle can cash in here. Either way, though, folks, this is through this evening. Again, time above my head. And it just continues. Snow, more snow, and then obviously the coastal rain. This is by Sunday afternoon. Keep on going through Sunday night, and this is what I was talking about. You see this little piece of energy? Yeah, this is a little upper level disturbance that kind of broke off from the main flow. This is by Sunday evening, and getting some of that snow now into the Dakotas and into the Twin Cities. And we'll eventually probably keep on even moving east here on this map. But it's just more of the same, wave after wave after wave of wintry weather into the Rockies and into the coastal areas, getting more of the rainfall, but still active weather. So, you add all that up and you're thinking, well, we're going to get some good snow. And you would be right. This is the blend of models over the next 3 days or so. 3 or 4 days, and look at these totals, folks. Again, the key kind of on the right-hand side of your screen there. The mountains just outside of Seattle, I mean, we're talking 4, 5, 6 feet of snow, and honestly, some of these totals are probably underdone a little bit, so trust me, I know 40 inches isn't quite 6 feet, but I think we'll probably get some places on these highest peaks that get near that. And even in Seattle, look at this. We've got a mean of snow. If we zoom into the city, it's not often to do this, but yeah, we could get some snow even in these lower elevations like Seattle. And then we zoom out even more and just kind of get a look at the Pacific Northwest in general. The Cascades going to get a good, Yellowstone going to get feet of snow on those higher peaks. The mountains through Idaho here, plenty of snow, and then even up into British Columbia, no shortage of snowfall here on the way with this pattern. A lot more La Nina like. Again, that La Nina is something that really affects your weather pretty often out west, and you're wondering, well, where has it been all winter? Well, it's back after a little bit of a hiatus, at least is what it felt like, now getting back into that much cooler, snowier pattern out there. Now, what about the east? We're not going to be all sunshine and rainbows here either. In fact, we're going to have some snow on the way this afternoon, evening. Here we go. This is our latest high-resolution rapid refresh model. And look at some of that blue breaking out into Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, into the UP of Michigan. Obviously not a huge storm system here, but we'll kind of save that for later on this coming week when we likely will have a much more impactful storm system. But either way, a good one here. We've got some snow crossing through Wisconsin, Michigan. This is overnight tonight into tomorrow morning here. And eventually by Sunday afternoon, this is going to get into the northeast, and we could get some, pretty good snow. Not a long-lasting event, but a good little band of moderate snowfall through the Finger Lakes, northern Pennsylvania, into Connecticut, Rhode Island, maybe New York City. Going to be close, probably more light rain, maybe snow mix there, maybe some light snow getting into northern New Jersey, but a good band of moderate snow, I think. This is tomorrow evening and overnight through Boston, much of Vermont, New Hampshire, into even Connecticut, Rhode Island, just off the coast there. Now, if you're down all the way near the coast, could mix with some rain, have some mixing issues, but overall, a nice little snow event, and that gets us into the early morning hours of Monday, and look what's happening behind it. Another piece of energy breaking off here, and that itself is also going to try to cross through and really bring some of the same area of snowfall once again. This is Monday morning. as far out as this model goes into Wisconsin and Michigan, and you can see that's setting up the stage for the next winter weather event. So let's talk about it. How much snow? Well, this is just the next 48 hours. So in the Dakotas, this will get both systems. This will get the first one and the second one, although you're really only getting the second one. But you get the idea. A nice swath here right along the border of 3 to 5 inches of snow. Going to be pretty likely. The Twin Cities here, talking a couple of inches of snow north of the city a little bit. Likely to get higher totals. And then you go up here towards kind of the Eli area, and we could see half a foot of snow up into the kind of northeastern corner there of Minnesota. But either way, a nice little event here for people that haven't really seen that much snow. The Dakotas, Minnesota, it's been a relatively quiet winter, at least in the snow department. It's been cold for a good bit of the time, but definitely has not been very snowy. That changing now. And we go further off to the east here towards Wisconsin, Michigan. Nice little winter weather event for you as well. Now, this is mainly the first system, but also kind of getting the beginning of the second system. So if you combine the two, it'll be more snow than this. But the UP going to be the bigger winners per usual with 3 to 6 inches of snow. And then you get even right here into the heart of northern Wisconsin, into kind of Michigan, the central and northern part of the thumb there. A good 2 to 4 inch snow event on the way. Out of this one, and then kind of the start of the second one. And then we get to the Northeast. Again, this just the first clipper, not including the second one. And places like Boston into Western Mass could get a good 1 to 3 inches of snow, likely higher in totals along the down east areas of Maine, where you're getting a little bit of the snow from today, plus this clipper that's coming in tomorrow. And overall, just not a bad little winter weather event. Now, obviously, no major winter storm, and you're thinking, well, Gerald, you told me at the beginning we were going to have a big storm. Where is it? Well, let's go ahead and switch gears and start talking about that. I'd say the near term, at least in the east, is a little more tranquil. But once we get into this coming week, specifically the middle of the week, that Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe, through, I'd say, really at least the middle of February, the pace looks to pick back up once more. And I think we're going to see more winter weather in that time frame begin to kind of ooze back into the country, if you will. So here we go. This is Monday afternoon, February 3rd. And you notice we've got this big upper level low pressure over portions of British Columbia. That's what we've been talking about. But what I want you to really focus on is kind of the boundary that sets up here. See this big ridge and kind of more zonal-like flow in the east? And let me draw it a little bit better here. That's bringing that warm, more mild spring fever-like air, if you will, through much of the southern part of the country. What's going to happen is a pretty sharp boundary is going to set up, I think, as we go through the next couple of days. And you can see that setting up here right around here. This is kind of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You kind of see that big block of blue begin to move a little bit further east and south, and we've got a very active jet stream pattern right through this area where I have the arrow drawn. And to the north, you've got very cold air kind of setting up, and then to the south, you've got warm air. So that's going to do a couple things for us. One, it's going to enhance the jet stream, and that's going to also help to allow whatever storms do form to potentially become a little bit stronger. They're going to have more cold air and warm air to work with. That increases the temperature and the pressure gradient, and the storm just likely to become stronger with that baroclinic instability, as we call it. So that's going to be the one problem. The other problem is obviously if you got the cold air on one side and warm air to more extreme levels of each, that could run the threat of some big winter weather and maybe some severe weather on the warm side. And that'll be the theme this week. But really, I'm more concerned about the winter weather chances. And here's kind of what it's going to look like. This is the latest European model, I think, showing the threat pretty well on this map. And we'll kind of move it ahead in time. Now, this is Wednesday morning on the European, and you're thinking, all right, well, what's happening? Well, I want you to watch this little area out here into the Rockies, specifically kind of the Colorado and Utah area there. That's going to get kicked to the east, and that's going to create just enough lift. We're going to get a storm system to kind of get going here, I think, by Wednesday afternoon. You can see that kind of energy beginning. That's storm system number 1 out across the country. And then we go a little bit further ahead into time. Here's storm system number 2 I'm watching by Saturday and Sunday. Right here's the energy. That one could also produce a pretty potent winter storm and kind of works on through the Northeast. And then after that, another threat I'm watching. We'll talk about that one a little bit more in depth at the end of the video, but that one could get even further south than these first 2 pieces of energy. Now, let's go ahead and show you some models, show you the differences between them and kind of what they look like. Let's skip it ahead into time. This is the latest GFS. And we'll start it right at Wednesday morning like we started with the vorticity map. Precipitation breaking out here, and you can kind of already see where that boundary is between the warm air and the cold air, kind of by where that snow and ice is mixing in. And get further ahead in time here, Wednesday afternoon, a nice winter weather event beginning into the northern mid-Atlantic. We've got snow and ice really into portions of the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, seeing some of that wintry weather here out of storm number 1. And eventually by the afternoon of February 6th, next Thursday, we've got a borderline nor'easter getting going up into the Northeast. And that's just storm number 1. Here comes storm number 2. You can see by Saturday the 8th, and that's storm number 2-ish. We'll call it storm number 2 adjacent. Here's really storm number 2, a little bit behind it, so you could argue 3 storms, but in terms of impacts, we'll call this one storm number 2. This is the night of the 9th and getting into Super Bowl Sunday. And check it out, another winter storm in the Northeast. This one even more potent than the first one, with plenty of winter weather as these boundaries collide. Again, you got that warm air and that cold air clashing, and that's helping to really, bump up these storm systems. That's the GFS. Let's look at the European. Let's back it up a little bit. I don't want to give you any spoilers. Here's Wednesday morning, starting here at the same time frame that we started at with the GFS. And you'll notice, again, that boundary creating a wintry mess. Now, the difference between the two is the placement. And I told you that's going to kind of be the tough part. The European, much further north on where that rain, snow, ice line kind of is. It's got most of the winter weather up into the Midwest and into the Great Lakes, and does get some winter weather into the Northeast. You'll see just not quite as far south as the GFS did. But the European, folks, that's a nasty ice storm for places like Detroit, the interior Northeast, even portions of kind of Iowa, Wisconsin. Maybe the Chicago metro could get kind of some of that messy freezing rain concerns. And then this gets into the Northeast. Again, just a nasty winter storm, not a pretty one, kind of a snowed, iced, rained, maybe snow on the backside kind of event. That's the first storm. High impact, just not a very fun one. And then we calm down a little bit again going into next weekend. Then we go all the way ahead into, again, that Super Bowl Sunday timeframe, and the European back with another big storm at that same time, with big snow, big ice, and also probably a pretty potent severe weather threat on the south side. Again, I told you, and that would be another threat that kind of potentially run into with this pattern. And that does look to be the case here on the European model. And then that kind of swings on through, brings the snow, brings the ice. And you're saying, well, slow down a little bit, show me, the specifics. We're still too far away for me to tell you exactly how much snow Boston's going to get, or if Philly's going to get snow or anything like that. But just know the pattern looking good for the Midwest and the Northeast. So places, and I'll go ahead and draw it on the map here. If you're anywhere in kind of this circled area, I would be watching the pattern for the potential of some sort of significant winter storm. If not the first one, then maybe the second one. And if not either of those, then watch what's coming in the middle of February. Again, we're going to get there in just a moment. But before we do, let's talk about the chances of these first 2 storms happening. And I think it's about a guarantee at this point. This is the chance of impactful freezing rain from the European and its ensembles. Notice that big blow up right around the 6th for places near Michigan, up into Pennsylvania, up into the northern Alleghenies, into the northern mountains of PA. We're running the chance of pretty impactful ice event here. We're seeing an 80% chance of at least a 1/10 of an inch of QPF being freezing rain. That would be more than enough to cause big problems. And then that kind of even spreads into the interior Northeast. And then you can see that continues into next Thursday and Friday, and then dwindles. Again, this is the ice threat, but then another blow up of ice potential with the second storm as, again, we get towards Super Bowl Sunday. And then after that, we'll talk about what comes next. Now, what about snow? People want the snow. They don't want the ice. I hear you. Trust me. Unfortunately, I can't control it. But chance of at least an inch of snow falling. Here's the first storm signal. The European, again, further north in the GFS. And because of that, the highest chance of snow is up here into North Dakota, Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, into the UP of Michigan. And I'll be honest, I think this is probably a little closer to reality. Remember, the GFS had kind of snow and ice further south. I think the European's closer to right, so I'm showing you that model just so you don't get your hopes up if you're a snow lover in, let's say, Ohio or Maryland or some of those places that the GFS might have shown it. Now, ice in those areas would be a higher in probability, but pure snow, I think, is pretty unlikely. And you can see that here with the big snow chance from the first storm in the northern tier and getting into Ontario, Quebec, and then even up into portions of the interior Northeast. Going to likely get snow out of the first storm. Then comes the Super Bowl storm, and notice it's much further south. This is the better storm if you're from the I-95 corridor, Boston, all the way down to really Philadelphia, and points in between New York City, Hartford, Bridgeport, into Rhode Island. This is going to be the better chance for you. And you can see that on the ensembles. Already near a 60% chance of accumulating snowfall, again, in that Super Bowl timeframe. So we'll see. It's a good look, though, on the ensembles here, and even back further than that into Michigan, Wisconsin, into portions of Minnesota, and even areas like Chicago, Cleveland, running the chance of some pretty good snow. But that's a mighty good signal for some snow, folks, in that time frame, and a good sign that winter is definitely not over. Now, those are the first two storms. I've been kind of teasing after the fact, and you're thinking, if you're watching in a place like, let's say, Nashville or Raleigh, North Carolina, Virginia, somewhere in more the Tennessee Valley, you're thinking, all right, well, that's great for them. What about me? Where's my snow? Well, not a guarantee, but I think the pattern at least gets more favorable as we go towards the middle of the month. And here's why. This is the same map I've been showing you for, well, basically since I started this channel, it feels like. But these are upper level kind of height maps. And notice what happens as we get closer towards the middle of the month. This pattern changes a little bit more in orientation, and this cold air begins to dig further south. Now, the problem is this is a better look for Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and areas kind of in this circle. If you're watching in Atlanta, Birmingham, Greenville, Spartanburg, and I know I said Raleigh and areas like that, but even down here, it still is not a great looking pattern. But if you're in more of the Little Rock, Memphis, Nashville, into Kentucky, maybe the northern mid-Atlantic, this is a better pattern for snow, as this would then change our low pressure track to something a little bit more like this. Instead of kind of what it's doing, which is a little bit further north currently. So we'll see how that plays out. I'll tell you, if we look at the operational runs, it's a little more promising far out into time. This is the Super Bowl storm. This is the GFS on that Sunday. You can see that storm system there. We just talked about it. Then look at what happens. The cold air gets further south, and look at now our boundary down and even bringing some snow to places like Virginia, Kentucky, Nashville, Oklahoma, Texas, into the Little Rock area through the Ozarks, and then that kind of continues for a little bit. So I do think the boundary going to dig south a little bit in the long range, and we'll see if that can, return winter weather chances into areas that maybe are a little bit further south. We'll see. Now, before we get there, though, the temperatures. Let's talk about that. Now, this is going to be absolutely terrific if you are a fan of spring weather in the south. Look at Monday afternoon. This is when that nation-divided thing I was telling you about earlier kind of begins. I mean, you talk about a temperature gradient, folks. We're 40 degrees below what we should be this time of year in Montana, and 30 degrees above what we should be into southern Wyoming Monday afternoon. So you talk about a sharp gradient. This is really going to kick up the wind in here, and also going to help to strengthen these storm systems as they cross over this gradient. There'll be plenty of instability for them to feed off of. And further south you go, I mean, it gets even better. We're talking 20, 30 degrees above what you should be, and we're starting to get into the later part of winter, so that sun angle getting a little bit higher. We're going to get highs in the 70s and potentially 80s into the south by next week, and notice that nice warm air holds on for a long time. It stays warm, but as we get further ahead into time, that boundary of cold air, like I said, is slowly working south. This is why we have snow chances in the Northeast and in the Northern Plains, and eventually, again, I told you that more favorable pattern by the middle of the month. This is around the 7th, 8th, 9th. Still staying warm in the deep south, but check it out. We go towards the middle of the month, the 11th, the 12th here. That blue air really begins to dive southward, and that's when the track could move south with it, and we will definitely watch that, and it kind of continues to battle it out over the middle part of the month, but definitely looking like an active February. Now, final thing I'll show you, high temperatures next Thursday, February 6th. Absolute spring fever in the southeast. Columbia, South Carolina, already going for a high of around 81. Yeah, that's shorts and t-shirt weather in February, but you go up north towards Bismarck, North Dakota, we're struggling to get into the teens. So I think this map shows kind of the general expectation through the next week pretty well. That nation divided, that active storm track in between, and kind of a wintry spring clash over much of the lower 48. Alrighty, folks, if you haven't already and you enjoyed the video, go ahead, like it, hit the subscribe button, and hit that bell for the latest notifications. And with that said, y'all have a great rest of your day. Stay warm, stay safe, and I'll see you all next time.